Hello, this is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is January 27th, 2025. Welcome to the podcast. Hey, the sun is out, it's a little warmer, so I am feeling like things are going in the right direction, right? Including the country. Today, I want to talk about the U.S. federal government policy on the cabinet positions that our president, Donald Trump, is putting into place. Now, as you know, there are 15 cabinet positions that the president has to put people to head these departments. Before I begin, I wanted to ask you again to follow me by subscribing and to pass it on to someone else. If you think that the podcast that you're listening to right now is effectively pushing for change. Okay, so there's a couple of things to talk about, but let's lay some foundation here. So we're talking about the president appointing people to the cabinet position. Now, as you've seen on the media, they make a big deal out of it. And the last several, well, probably 20 years always sounds good because it's been a long time, that they have really started getting into people's personal lives. And to some extent, they have done that the whole time. What triggers that? Well, it's triggered when Congress, or in this case, the Senate, doesn't like people and then they just come after them, right? We saw it during President Trump's first administration when they went after the Supreme Court nominees. But with the cabinet positions, I want to emphasize, is there too much emphasis on the media pretty much making a circus out of it? Why do the American people need to know if somebody drank alcohol and what's going on in their private lives? Shouldn't the focus be on what they're going to do if put in the position? Now, this is important because I want to define what the cabinet member is supposed to do. So, the cabinet member is appointed by the president. We all know that. And they serve at the pleasure of the president, which basically means if the president doesn't like what they're doing, guess what? They can get rid of them. They can dismiss them from office at any time without the approval of the Senate or downgrade their cabinet member status. I wasn't aware that they could downgrade them, basically make them the deputy and put somebody else in charge. Now, remember something. Cabinet positions are advisory. They are there to advise the president. Here's why that's important. They keep making a big deal about people's character and experience. Now, that's okay, but what you want here is actually the cabinet secretaries don't have any real power. The power comes from the president. Now, if you will remember something, during President Trump's first term, a lot of people quit that were in cabinet positions. Well, the reason that they quit was because President Trump wanted to change the policy, and these career politicians who he appointed along that his party wanted, they pushed back. And a real good example of that was the Secretary of Defense. Now, you go back and check this out, and like I always say, you won't hear this from the mainstream media. The secretaries or cabinet members are supposed to follow the guidance from the president. They're not supposed to tell the president what to do or to say that they won't do something. That's what set things in motion for the firings in the past and what will happen now. So the pushback from the Senate is really because they know that these cabinet people will follow the advice of President Trump in this case, and that's what scares them because there seems to be this feeling in the Democratic Party that they don't want any changes. They want everything to be status quo. And that's why they are overly trying to dig up dirt on their opponents, which I think is very unethical. Now, if the cabinet person, like let's take something as easy as finance, right? Working with the budgets and all of that stuff, and money is involved. If they're putting someone in there from Wall Street who bankrupted the banks or bankrupted their company, that's fair game to question this person's ability to lead and be a secretary or in the cabinet position. That makes sense. Energy, the same way. But Secretary of Defense? Okay. Well, what is that guy going to do that can't be undone in 4 years? And they brutally attacked the Secretary of Defense. And that to me was the unethical behavior. Now, I've talked about the role of the cabinet secretary, and that part is very important. They are just advisors to the president. And yes, the president will take their input, but especially with this administration, look at Homeland Security. Okay, for example, the president promised to deport people, and if we don't like it and you voted against it, you have said your word. But now he wants to put someone in there that's going to follow his policy, and that makes sense. When we set up our own offices and we're in charge of it, don't we want people in place that are going to follow our instructions? I can't think of any CEO that would put people into place that they're going to bump heads with or have them go around them or basically undermine everything that they do. And so during Trump's first administration with his cabinet picks, that's what happened. So now you know why he adamantly wants the people that he chose. And I totally agree with doing it that way. And I think people's perceptions was that the secretary or cabinet position person was running that department. And yes, administratively they are, but they're not making the decisions for that department. They're making decisions based on what the president is telling them to do. That's a huge difference, and that's perception. And on the mainstream medias, you'll never hear that because the president is ultimately responsible for these cabinet positions. and they must follow his advice or her advice, because if they don't, that's not the will of the voters. And the cabinet positions, they're not elected to those positions. And that's the difference that never ever gets talked about. And so all of this theater, because that's what it is, doesn't matter, because that this person is supposed to do what the president says, and if they don't, guess what? They're going to be fired. And the media has mistaken it to make you think that, well, it has to be people in these cabinet positions that kind of sort of agree with us and will push back against what the president wants to do. And that's any president, not just Trump. But in this case, it is about him, because he is really trying to make some significant changes on how we are doing things in the country. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. As usual, please post, make comments. Thank you, and have a good day.